All right, we are live. Thank you so much for your patience, all. We were ironing out some technical difficulties, but we are all set now. Welcome. We are so excited to have you here today. I would recommend that we start firing up that live chat. Would love to start seeing where folks are joining from. And if you feel comfortable sharing, please let us know how you're feeling. Nice. We've got friends joining from Idaho. You got a shout out, Rich. I'm sure we've already got some of your fans here today. All right. So as those come in, we've got friends joining from Australia. Thank you. Thank you. Folks are feeling excited. All right. So my name is Camila Mize, and I will be your moderator for today's session. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this session on the impacts of emotional intelligence at work. I have the privilege of getting to introduce you to our two panelists today, Rich Hua and Kim Bilyeu. I'll tell you a little bit about both of them. I'll do a little introduction, and then we're going to jump in, start asking some questions, and hopefully have a really fun and engaging conversation. I encourage you to ask questions. If you'll notice, there's a little toggle between Q&A and chat. So if you do have questions that you want us to address, please use that Q&A button. And to get us started, Kim, I'm going to introduce you first. So Kim Bilyeu leads one of the global education teams at the medical device sector of Biosense for Johnson & Johnson, where she focuses on the strategy and design of all learning programs that will be launched around the world. She believes that there is power in gaining knowledge and even more in giving it away. Kim, thank you so much for being with us today. And next, Rich Hua, who's our global technology strategist and innovation evangelist for Amazon Web Services. Welcome, Rich. He has spent decades training and mentoring people in leadership and interpersonal skills. Rich also founded the Emotional Intelligence and Success Initiative at Amazon, and his team has trained over 100,000 people. We'll repeat, 100,000 people around the world in emotional and social intelligence. So his training is now an integral part of onboarding, sales, leadership development programs across numerous Amazon companies globally. Welcome, Rich. Welcome, Kim. I am thrilled to get to be here with you today. And Kim, I'm going to start with you, and I would like to know, how did you come to the realization that EI training was a need within Biosense?
Yeah, thanks, Camila. So one of the interesting points about Biosense Webster is the vast majority of our sales force are engineers by trade, specifically biomedical engineers. So we work in hospitals, and we started to hear as we began really ramping up the number of people we were hiring, not just in the US, but around the world, and they were increasingly getting younger with less experience, that more often than we would like, people were getting what we would say thrown out of the lab, meaning that the physician was fed up with how they were interacting and would send them off. And that was a loss of business for us. And obviously you don't want business lost. And so as we started exploring, okay, what's the root cause of this? We realized that they just didn't know how to talk to other people, regulate their emotions. When you're in a hospital lab, there's a patient on the table, and when things go sideways, you need to react, and you need to react well. And the physician, when their emotions are high, you can't necessarily match them and just be angry or anxiety ridden together. You have to regulate. And so we thought, well, there is no better way than to actually teach them these skills. And so for me, I had encountered the Permission to Feel book by Mark Brackett through one of my all-time favorite authors and podcast hosts, Brene Brown. I devoured the book. I was like, oh my gosh, I need more of this in my life. I need to introduce this to the world in which I have influence. And so I literally started handing the book out. And then I was like, okay, I need to make this into a training program. And so I was trying to reach out to Mark to find out, could I have permission to do that? And Camila, you responded to my email and you're like, oh, hey, by the way, we've already built this. And I'm like, excellent. So we explored that together, and it's been an amazing partnership that we've seen huge growth in our field force since we started a year ago.
Here, here. Thank you, Kim. That's awesome. And Rich, I've got the same question for you, which is how did you come to the realization that emotional intelligence training specifically was a need within Amazon?
Well, the first thing I'd say is, first of all, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for taking some time. I really hope this will be beneficial to everyone. I've got lots of stories to share. But I start with the fundamental premise that everyone can improve their success and their career and their life and their relationships with more emotional intelligence. So no matter how high it is anywhere, I think we can all benefit from increasing that. And the beautiful thing, it's obviously developable skill. But Amazon's this incredibly innovative, fast-paced, very data-driven company, right? And I've had the incredible privilege of working with super talented, smart, high-performing people. But as I've seen at many companies, I realize that we tend to index on the IQ part, right, and leave out the emotional intelligence part. And so I saw an opportunity where people were dealing with a lot of stress, as any innovative company is going to be dealing with, expectations, showing empathy to each other in the midst of that stress. And then, of course, being positive, right? And having this sort of positive outlook. And then a few things happened over the last couple of years that you may be familiar with. One of them was called the pandemic. That certainly caused everyone to start feeling a lot of things. And then, of course, all the discussion around racial equity and the injustices that we're really striving to deal with. And so people were feeling so many things: anxiety and discouragement and anger and fear and languishing, whatever emotions you may have. And so what we saw was a lot of leaders didn't totally know how to respond to that. Many did, but many did not. And so as a collective whole, more and more people realize how important emotions really are to not just our personal life, but our work life, and then knowing how to handle them in a better way. And so I think that really opened a massive door to be able to, talk to people at all levels about just how important all these emotional things really are, right? And as Mark likes to say, it influences 5 key things, right? Decision-making, all this other stuff. And so, I think it really helped the conversation move forward.
Yeah, and I see this common thread of we've got highly educated, highly trained, highly engaged folks, right? That we're ultimately bringing this work to. And how many of us have been told that emotions are something that should be left at the door at work, when we know deeply that the reality is they're with us all the time. They're impacting every interaction, every conversation, problems we're trying to solve as teams, issues that we're having with clients, or in the case that you brought up, Kim, with physicians in the lab. So Kim, back to you. Once you identified that lack of emotional intelligence was contributing to this problem, how did you get internal support from leadership? And was it hard, or was it easy to get buy-in and start addressing this right away? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you all for, like Rich said, taking the time to chat with us today. It was surprisingly easy. I thought this would be a very challenging conversation to have, but because we had seen this uptick in lost revenue, quite honestly, and we were bringing a solution that was relatively low cost, and we were able to intertwine it. The timing was perfect. We were already redesigning our new hire training. And so we were able to fold it into new hire training. So people were going to graduate and be ready to enter the sales force with these additional skills without adding more time. And so our leadership team, they were like, yes, absolutely, let's try it. They're very open. BioSense Webster, much like Amazon, a very innovative, fast-moving company. We call ourselves the startup within J&J, which is the best place to try to be a startup, by the way. And so we were able to garner that support. So we started it in the US. It's now going to launch in Europe. We have some friends in Australia working on this. The obvious positive outcome after the first rounds of people going through have been just so overwhelming that everyone is like, okay, we want this for more people. And so now we have our leadership team coming to my counterpart in the US saying, okay, we want to train everyone. And that's 1,000 people in the US that's in our field force. And Europe, like I said, they're just getting started, but we have a feeling we'll see the same kind of positive results there, where when you equip people to be better able to manage their own responses and not just to tense situations, but just to be better capable to handle whatever comes your way in life. Because for me, it's not If this only impacted the business, I'd be like, nah, okay, fine. But this is about life. And so leaving your work at home is real. Like, you bring all of yourself together. So saying leave your emotions at the door is foolish, just as foolish as saying, okay, leave work at work and home at home. I remember thinking that that was the right answer when I started my leadership journey, and then realized, wait a second, I can't do that. And I'm trying really hard. Somebody that were paying $8 an hour in my early career, you're like, they're never going to be able to do that because they have less incentive to even try. So the fact that it's just not real to do that, and to say leave half of yourself behind, doesn't make sense if we want to get the best out of our people. So this was one of the easiest I need more money conversations I've ever had with leadership. And we have just seen it be like wildfire. People are so excited and so grateful for the opportunity. Now, you have naysayers. Please hear me, that this is not saying everyone thinks it's amazing, but it's like 99% think it's amazing, and 1% are curmudgeons, and we have to help them understand why this matters. But even they eventually get on board. And it has been truly an amazing journey for us.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. And I'm seeing a similar thread here, Rich, that I would love for you to share more about, which is this kind of hidden, like latent demand, right? You bring this up and you might be anticipating, what are folks, especially at the leadership table, going to think about engaging with this work? And Rich, same question, once you identified that EI training, EI education was a need within Amazon, how did you get internal support from leadership? And for those who haven't had the chance to meet you yet, I think it would be great to hear the story of how these talks started, and a similar kind of growth that occurred as well.
Sure, absolutely. I love telling the story. And first of all, the thing I wanted to say was I actually don't do this full time. My full-time job is I drive a multi-billion-dollar managed database business strategy globally. That's actually my real job. But my hobby and passion is actually helping train people in emotional and social intelligence skills. And so that's what's kind of really interesting. So I'm a volunteer, but what happened was I started training people in my office in San Francisco on some of these skills, because I developed a training from decades and training other people. So I thought, hey, this might be helpful for salespeople, for account managers, for technical support people, and they loved it, right? And so I was training small groups of people, 50 here, 100 there, and then I submitted my talk for our giant sales kickoff for AWS back in 2019. This is where like tens of thousands of people show up. And I thought, hey, they might accept it. This is totally different from anything we've ever talked about at SCO. But I submitted on a whim, and they said, sure, we'll try this out. And they gave me a room for 185 people. And they said, let's see if anybody shows up to this goofy talk on emotional intelligence. But what happened was, the day before my talk, so many people tapped that they wanted to attend the session. They called me up and said, holy moly, we got to move you to a slightly bigger room. And they put me in a room for 1,000 people. And so what wound up happening was, it was standing room only. They had to turn people away at the door. And it wound up being one of the highest rated sessions at the entire event. And so what that made people realize was, there is a lot of interest for this topic. This is really valuable, shown by the incredible turnout of employees, as well as, all the people who basically gave it such a high rating. And so rinse and repeat, did it again at another event for technical kickoff, did it again in 2020, wound up being the single highest attended event, breakout event there, and highest rated as well. So that got the attention of leaders, right? Leaders are saying, what is this? What is this emotional intelligence stuff? And so senior leaders from around Amazon started going, hey, can you come and share this content with my team or my leadership? And really, I've not met a single leader that opposed it. It's just that they didn't realize its value, because there's so many competing priorities, just like you said, Kim, right? People are busy. It's fast paced. We're trying to change the world. And so all this data sort of made people look at it and say, wow, there's something here that I think can really be valuable. And then, as I mentioned a little earlier, with the pandemic and all that has happened, suddenly everyone wanted to understand these things like emotional resilience, stress management, empathetic leadership, right? And so that really gave people such a greater appetite to understand the emotional realm. And a couple of things I often say is I use a lot of science to help people understand the value, right? Like people say, hey, we're a really data-driven company. What does all this emotional, fluffy stuff have to do with anything? And I tell them, emotions are data. And they're like really, really important data points, right? If you're meeting me for the first time, my expression is this versus this. It's kind of an important data point. You probably want to take that into account when you greet me, right? And the reality is, no matter how hard you try to leave your emotions at the door, it is humanly impossible, right? We experience emotions 90 to 100% of the time. And unless you're from the planet Vulcan, you're going to be having emotions all over the place. And so instead of trying to, suppress them, learn to intelligently leverage them for your success and the success of those around you.
Thank you. And speaking of learning how, right, to leverage them, Kim, this is back to you. Trying to improve emotional intelligence, especially in new employees, that is not an easy challenge to try and solve. And so can you tell us a little bit more about how you went about addressing this?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing we did was we tried to grow something on our own. And so we started off by training our field trainers. So in our sales force, it's a highly technical training that's required. We're in hospitals, we're assisting without ever touching a patient, but we're assisting with running software that makes what the physician is doing possible. So we have to be very technical. So we hire people who are very technical. So we started by training our field trainers. So those are the folks who are with them, supervising the new hires in the labs until they have met criteria to be solo artists. And so we started by training them on giving them some just basics about emotional intelligence that we had learned and discovered and built out a training program ourselves. Then, like I said earlier, I discovered OG Life Lab, where they have already built something that is phenomenal and inexpensive, to be very straightforward. And so we were able to, as we were rethinking the design of our new hire program, we were able to bring that in, and it fit very nicely because we were completely changing and moving away from long modules because they're of the devil, and moving to micro learning, which is exactly what OG is designed to be, is these quick hits that take you from A to Z, from beginning to end, for those of you not in the US, A to Z, so that we can see progress. And that matched up so perfectly with what we were already doing, with how we were designing our training, that it didn't make sense for us as novices in this field to try to recreate the wheel when we had experts who had already done it for us, and who were so incredibly collaborative that they let us come in and say, hey, here are some things we would like to see changed, and here's why. We try not to just be fussy about things, but an opportunity to share our expertise from a training perspective. And it just made it so easy to align with this and really give skills. So this isn't just fluff. This isn't, here's how you should just feel good about yourself. And we don't do kumbaya circles, although if they help, great. But that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is giving people actual measurable skills, to Rich's point, data points that they can come back to and go, where am I at? The mood meter has become the number one thing that we have adopted as an organization. So everyone talks about, where are you at on the mood meter? So as we were coming into this, I was definitely in a high yellow state. I was really excited, but also pretty nervous because I was the one having technical issues trying to sort out. And so I have been regulating as we've gone along, and just some deep breathing and thinking about all of my best self showing up, because I too have learned these things. And that's the value of giving real skills, is it gives you something to fall back on when you feel like, I am in uncharted territory. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, but I've got skills that I can pull out and start employing. So for us, that's really what we did. We allowed you at OG to work your magic.
It was a partnership for sure, Kim.
For sure. But it has been such an amazing partnership that it's been very easy for me. My role is to create assets and deploy them around the world. So this was a very easy one to then champion with all of my regional partners, because They don't have to do anything that I tell them. I have absolutely no authority. What I have is a lot of enthusiasm. And so this was a really easy one to sell to them because it makes sense and it's so easy and so worthwhile that I've told them, I said, it doesn't make sense for you not to do this. And they have all now adopted that same perspective.
Thank you. It's so good and satisfying to hear. That's the kind of stuff that gets us all up and excited to do the work that we do. So thank you so much, Kim. And Rich, Kim, you were just talking about your enthusiasm, right? And there's kind of that contagion of enthusiasm and folks that really start to understand and have those light bulbs go off as to just how transformative this work can be. So Rich, I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit more about how that's shown up in the way that folks have also volunteered to help bring this work even further within Amazon?
Yeah. And I love the question because it's really a secret how we've reached over 100,000 people, right? You're like, how did this guy do this on a volunteer basis? Did he clone himself? I mean, not quite yet. I think one of me in the world is enough, trouble causing. But so what happened was after I did my talk back in 2020 at our sales kickoff, a whole bunch of people came up to me and said, we want to help you with this. We love what you're talking about. What can we do? And my answer was, I have no idea. Why don't we have dinner? Let's talk about it. And so basically about 12 of us got together for dinner, and they were all like, hey, I'm in Canada. I'm in Europe. I'm in, APAC. I'm over here. We want to help somehow. So we basically created this group, what I call the EQ champions. And they're all people who are passionate about practicing, growing in, and sharing about emotional intelligence all across different parts of Amazon. So that was the seeds of it. And what's happened is over time, as we've delivered more of these talks, more and more people said, how can I help, right? This sounds so amazingly meaningful and invigorating. And so we built across all parts of Amazon over 200 EQ champions at all levels. Like we're talking some people who are, brand new to the workforce, others who are like senior leaders in different parts of Amazon. And they're like, look, I'm super excited. I want to bring this to my leadership team. I'm going to bring this to my entire organization. I've got it all hands with 5,000 people. Can you show up and talk about emotional intelligence for, an hour? I mean, there's been so many supporters. We've also developed a team of what I call EQ evangelists who are all trained and certified to deliver this content, right? To talk about it in a way that is compelling, that is inspiring, that is convincing. So we've got a team of a couple of dozen of them now, and they're basically being deployed all over the world whenever we get requests. So by the end of this year, we'll have delivered over 350 sessions across, consumer, operations, AWS, hardware, advertising, all over. And they're basically being done by this team. The other thing I'd say that's kind of a secret sort of part of it, it's not really super secret, but that I didn't realize was along with the volunteers also building a community that continuously engages people, right? So after these sessions, people started saying, well, how can I continue my journey? You just talked for an hour or an hour and a half. That was so amazing. I want more. So we created a wiki with all these resources, TED Talks and apps, including, the OG Life Lab app, articles, book recommendations. And I also started an email list where essentially every day I and my team send out one article that has something to do with emotional intelligence. It could be about stress management, leadership, empathy, inclusion, all sorts of things. And now we have, I think the last count, over 50,000 people who are subscribed to it. So every day they get one piece of emotional intelligence goodness and inspiration. And I've had people say this is literally the single greatest perk of working at Amazon is your EQ newsletter, even though it's not even an official perk, right? And so, so that's built this community of people who are getting a nudge every day in the direction of being more emotionally intelligent. I had no idea how powerful this would actually be, but people love it. And so along with that, of course, we have a Slack channel with thousands of people on it, always buzzing all the time. So it's these volunteers who are passionate. We call them missionaries, not mercenaries. And then we also have this idea of this community of people constantly reinforcing this idea. And it's it's kind of like a virtuous flywheel. It just kind of goes around faster and faster and faster and gains momentum on its own. So those are a couple of things that have really made a huge difference here at Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you, Rich. And I'm thinking about just the power of building a shared vocabulary, right? Having neutral language that you can use to describe when emotions are showing up that may be helpful or maybe aren't that helpful in a given situation. And I've noticed across the different, industries that we have the opportunity to work with, that's something that's been common, is having that community, building a shared language, having a cohort learning model is a really powerful way of implementing this in a way that sticks. And we've talked a bit about awareness building, right? Where we're getting people to learn, what exactly is this? What are we talking about when we say emotional intelligence? Something that's really important to us here at OG is going from awareness to action, right? How do you practice this in a way that's actually going to help you meet the challenges that you're facing at work, and be better prepared to deal with them? And so, Kim, it's been a little over a year since we've had the opportunity to bring this to new employees, and the footprint's starting to grow. Can we talk about some of the ways that we've seen this in action, addressing some of those key issues that you brought up at the top of this conversation?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
I'll start with how it's impacted my team and how we function, and then I'll talk about what it's been for our field force as well. So for my team, we start our meetings with where are you at on the mood meter? And so sometimes even when we're having meetings with other people, somebody will come in and they're like, "Hey, I just need to let everyone know I am in the red. I just got off a call with a very difficult call. I just need a minute." And so we can add that very quick, that shared vocabulary has really helped us, because now it's not, oh gosh, I have to explain and try to pull out emotional language. But even more, we've expanded our emotional vocabulary. So now we're not just mad, sad, glad. We can talk about, I'm pissed, I'm overjoyed, I'm content. And that expansion helps us to be more specific about what we're actually feeling versus just kind of this overarching, I'm sad. When I actually might not be sad, I might be heartbroken, or I'm not mad, I'm jealous, or I'm envious, wherever you are. But being able to add that language in has helped us a lot. When it comes to addressing some of the things that are happening in the field, that's been the most rewarding. So it's been really nice for my team because it's helped us have a very quick shorthand to understand each other better. But when we talk about the field force, what we've seen, and it's been a really fun surprise, the feedback that we've gotten, because now what we hear, instead we were hearing, these young people, when they come to the field, they're just not ready. They don't know how to act like grownups. And we've got a lot of that. And now it's like, oh my gosh, we are just getting the very best people out in the field. They're so just able to roll with whatever's happening in the lab, and they just seem so much more calm. We must be doing a much better job hiring. And I'm like, maybe, but also remember, we've added this other piece to it, because for some of the second and third tier leaders, like they're in between, they haven't quite got the full message yet. And so that's opened the door to have that larger conversation with them about, well, yes, maybe you are just killing it in the hiring, but also we've added this component. They're like, oh yeah, that's right, I remember hearing something about that. Can I get it for my team? That's always the next thing that comes out of their mouth. They're like, oh, well, I want it for everyone on my team, which is why now we're going to be rolling it out to everyone in the company, which is exciting. But that's really what we've seen, is the incidence of people being incapable of navigating the heightened emotions of the lab has decreased significantly. So now what they're having to realize is it's no longer the new kids that are causing the dilemmas in the lab. Now it's some of our tenured folks who have all of the skills technically, but they don't have that interpersonal relationship management. And so it's time for them to build those skills. And that, again, is being echoed by their leadership.
Thank you so much, Kim. And I think it's so helpful when we get to imagine these real world scenarios, right, that folks are in. And, everyone's feeling the reality of pressure, stress, overwhelm, burnout, the impacts of chronic stress. And so when you start to get these practical tools that you can use in real time, when we do find ourselves in those situations, it gives me so much hope for how we can meet these moments differently, right? And then start to model that behavior for others who get the chance to see, that was a different way of dealing with in this situation, a physician who might be having some activated emotions, as we would describe.
And they are often activated. by any number of things.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that you don't always know what is going to be that moment, because the physician might be coming in from a really challenging case, and you get them already in that heightened emotional space, and you have to be able to recognize it and then know how to navigate. And that's been the biggest set of additional skills that we've seen. And it's just, in addition to the skills, it's given these folks confidence to know, I know how to handle this now. I've got 7 things I can try, versus, man, if this one thing that I've always used my whole life doesn't work, I've got nothing, which is where most people start.
Yeah, well, and this ties in with a question that just came in during the chat here about how we measure progression, right, or success in this type of work and initiative. So, Kim, Rich, I'll open that up to each of you.
Kim, you want to take that one first?
Sure. So for us, the way we measure progression, it is, there are 2 elements to it. One is, did you engage fully with the program? So did you go all the way through the OG Life Lab process, and what was your experience like? And then we follow up later with, how are things going with we have a survey that we send out 30 days following their completion of their training, and then another 90 days after their new hire completion, so that we can find out how are things going. And one of the questions has to do with, how are you navigating the emotions of the life in the lab? And then just look, so we have those data points, and then looking at just globally at our field force and the number of incidents that we're seeing, as far as people being removed from the lab, physicians withdrawing their business from us. This is a highly competitive space that we work in. And so if we annoy a physician, they'll just pull their business from us and give it to our competitors. And so, how do we, the best way we can prevent that is to make sure we have the best trained and the most emotionally intelligent teams in the field. And that has been our mainstay. And as the space gets ever more crowded, it becomes ever more important for us. And that's where our senior leaders are on board, because they recognize, if we don't do this, we lose our competitive advantage.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. Sort of building on that, I think there's sort of 2 types of data that every organization has to kind of look at to understand progression and efficacy, right? And actual change. And that is, there's sort of quantitative, numerical data. And then there's also qualitative, anecdotal data, right? We use both in all of our decisions within Amazon. And so with this, it's also similar. And so it really kind of depends on the organization, right? Each organization is deciding on what are the data points that are most valuable to them. So there's not really a one size fits all. Like, for instance, in customer service, as you learn emotional intelligence skills, obviously, satisfaction of people who call in, ratings of customer service people. We have hundreds of thousands of them, around the world every time we call Amazon.com, right? So that's certainly one thing that can be measured in sales, right? There's another one, right, with their customers and how they're feeling, and their CSATs, and even earned revenue, right? There's ways to look at that. And then leaders, we actually have this really interesting system within Amazon that pretty much gives you 1 question a day. It's called Connections. It's widely been written about. But instead of having like an end of the year survey, you get 1 question a day, every day. It just pops up on your computer, and you're like, and a lot of them are about, well, how do you feel about work? How do you feel about your manager? Do you feel like you're valued? Do you want to return to the office or not? Like all these kind of different questions. And so we take that data, and we can aggregate it so managers can get an idea of, well, how do people in my organization feel about my leadership? And so those are sort of qualitative things that can be done depending on the organization. I will say quantitative. One really qualitative thing I love is just the feedback people have given. I mean, I remember delivering a session on emotional intelligence, how that can apply to resilience. And a very, very senior leader at Amazon basically said, hey, I watched your emotional resilience video today. It was awesome. I posted it to my leadership team in Chime Room. I've learned a ton, and I felt so much less angst after watching it. I'm so grateful for you and that training. Thanks for helping so much in this difficult time. So
Mm.
having things like that, just like it's worth a million data points,
Yeah.
right? Because you can see how much you've made an impact on somebody and the impact that they want to then share with those around them.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought up the qualitative versus quantitative data, right? Because that's always a when we're thinking about the ROI of EI and organizations. And Inez, just to punctuate this as well, we would hear stories from folks that are taking what they're learning and actually applying it in a way that's making a difference in their lives at work or at home. And we came up with a method for actually collecting those stories and understanding, where those key areas of impact are. Is this helping you manage your stress more effectively? Is this helping to improve the quality of your relationships in the workplace, for example? And so, Kim, using Biosense, for example, we've got thousands of real world stories of situations where someone's been in the lab and a physician, they've had a situation where things are getting heated, stress is high, the stakes couldn't be higher. I mean, given the reality of what your employees are doing and helping physicians with. And they share how they took what they learned in the program and applied that made a difference for them. And so we can see and start to understand, and marry those two, the qualitative and the quantitative information, to really know, are people feeling better prepared to meet the challenges they're facing at work? Are we seeing an improvement in the quality of relationships, decisions that are being made, or in this case, managing stress or these other impacts areas as well. So just wanted to add a little bit more to that too. Now, Rich, so given the success and really the wild success of these EI initiatives at Amazon, can you tell us a little bit more about what the future is looking like in terms of EI at Amazon and your own role as a thought leader?
Yeah. Before I let the cat out of the bag a little bit, I will say a couple of things, which is, if anybody wants to do this kind of thing, what I did was, I and my team, we were dreaming big, but we started small, right? And it was the idea of really finding what I call, true believers, right? People who are actually really personally passionate about practicing these skills, and they believe in its power and its benefit, and also wanting to share with other people. So I think that was really amazing. And then also tapping into people's intrinsic motivations, right? One of the things that has been so amazing with the team of EQ champions is somebody have come back to me and said, I have another day job too. Like, this isn't even my job. I actually manage a team of 50 people, 100 people, but getting to actually deliver talks on emotional intelligence, on stress management, on positivity, on resilience, on empathy, literally is the highlight of my week. Like, beyond my regular job, this 1 hour slot was the greatest thing I did at work. And so just the incredible sense of meaning and joy that people get from not just receiving, but also sharing it, right? And so built on top of that, I actually proposed that I actually take on this role full time. And I thought, after 100,000 people, this is probably a little more than a side project. We should probably invest in it a little bit. And so I basically wrote a document. We do a lot of that at Amazon. I got it approved by my vice president. And he was totally thumbs up. Let's do it. This is amazing. We want to be able to make this happen. So I'm basically moving in a new role as the worldwide head of a leadership program I'm calling the EPIC Leadership Program. And it basically is going to teach people in emotional social intelligence. And E is for empathy, P is for purpose, I is for inspiration, and C is for connection. And so building on top of the leadership principles that we already espouse and really try to embody at Amazon, my tagline is don't try to be a good leader. Don't settle for being a good leader. Don't settle for being a great leader. Strive to be an epic one. And so, that's the whole idea. And so I'll be moving into that in the very near future, hiring a team. And our long-term goal is to create a program that really helps up-level the emotional and social intelligence of our own leaders, not just at AWS, but across Amazon. And also be able to share it with customers, of people outside. And as we undergo our own evolution, that hopefully we can turn around and also share some of those learnings with other people. So no one is espousing that we're any kind of expert or we've got it figured out. Not at all. It is day one. We are learning and growing and trying to figure this out as we go. We know there's room for evolution and growth and improvement. And so as we undergo this journey, hopefully we can bring others along with us.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I find myself trying to regulate my like big yellow emotion. I'm like, don't shout into the microphone, Camila, but it's huge, Rich. It's amazing. And it's such a big signal, right? For those of us that are at leading organizations about the power of this work. It actually reminds me of the inflection point of, SEL is something that's regularly talked about in schools, but 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. And we're really starting to see that shift at the organizational level. And when it comes to us adults that didn't get the benefit of receiving an emotion education. So just kudos to you. It's such a beautiful story. And we're so excited to be able to watch and support and celebrate watching that transformation at Amazon as well. So
thank you.
Now I'm curious, Kim and Rich, what advice do you have for folks? And you started to allude to this a bit, Rich, for people who are trying to get some buy-in, some initiative, some support at their organizations. You both have examples of, being in positions where you had to get that sort of buy-in and support in an organic way to start. So what are some advice or tips that you have for folks who want to bring this into their workplace?
Rich, you want to take this one first?
Sure. Yeah. So a couple of things is, I think of Field of Dreams a lot, the Kevin Costner film. If you build it, they will come. I actually think about it all the time. Right. And the fact is, this idea of wanting to have a meaningful life and a meaningful impact is really inside all of us. Right. I think every human being fundamentally is driven by this idea of connection. And so if we really build it, birds of a feather start flocking together, right? Like people start going, I want to be a part of this. I want to support it. I want to enjoy the goodness of it, right? And so I think it was something really powerful that, again, you don't have to start big, start small, but dream big, right? It could just be with your team. Right? It could be you're the manager, or maybe you're not the manager, but you go to your manager and say, I have an idea of how to make our team even better and, even more cohesive, even higher performing. You can look at Project Aristotle from Google about highest performing teams, psychological safety, empathy, beautiful stuff there. You can bring some data and go, we can make our team better. I mean, what manager is going to say, nah, forget that. I want, lousy team, right? So you can start small, and then as you build sort of momentum and efficacy and demonstrate that it actually has impact, more and more people, I guarantee, will start coming to it. The other thing is aligning to the goals of your organization, right? There's a lot of sales and marketing involved if you're trying to, create a transformation. Like you can be super empathetic, super good at, EI, but if you can't persuade other people, you're not going to really grow anything. So you have to kind of put on your sales hat a little bit. And if you want a great book on it, Daniel Pink wrote a book called To Sell is Human. And his whole point is everybody's in sales. And, even if you're a parent trying to sell your kids on the broccoli, right, you're in sales. So we need to learn how to persuade other people. And so that attunement with what's important to others is really powerful. Because, if I would have just come and said, hey, I think we all need to be more positive, happier, and be more emotionally expressive, people would have been like, what's your problem? But I talked about high-performing teams. I talked about resilience. I talked about stress management. I talked about the need for greater empathy as we go through the pandemic, and that really resonated with people. So aligning to people's goals and, visions. And then final thing I'd say is, you don't actually have to have every single person believe. Research has found, from Google did a bunch of research on this, that if you just have 15% of your organization who are believing and practicing, it transforms the rest of the organization. Because essentially it means in every meeting, there's at least one person who understands emotional intelligence. And if it's a leader, even better, but there's somebody who can be a proponent, and that is a critical mass that really starts spinning that flywheel. So that's the magic number. If you can get to 15%, then you've basically got that flywheel spinning, and it'll just begin spinning faster and faster. You don't have to reach 100%, but if you can get that 15, then you've got something really beautiful. And so anyway, those are some things that made a difference for me, and I hope they're helpful.
Thank you, Rich. Those are super practical and things we can start to take into action for friends that are joining today. Kim, any advice for folks that are trying to bring this into their organizations?
Yeah, if your organization isn't quite as, monstrous as Amazon, and you're thinking, how do I do this maybe on a slightly smaller scale? So, I work within Johnson & Johnson, which is a behemoth as well, but within my business, it's much smaller. And so I know all of my key players, and I was able to understand, this is picking up a bunch of what Rich was saying. I was able to understand what mattered to them. So what mattered to them was lost revenue, our company, and by that, our people's reputation. So being able to show them, here's how this additional thing that we're asking for, that we want to start doing, is going to positively impact the things that you care the most about. And then also letting them peek behind the curtain, because a lot of them were like, I'm not doing a kumbaya circle. Like that was I use that twice now because it is something someone actually said to me in leadership.
You didn't tell them that we have the kumbaya circle in level 2?
I wanted to keep that for later. I wanted them to understand what we were actually doing, not what they feared we might be doing. And so shared with them the vision of what we were going to do, what it looked like, gave them access, and then also gave them a very high level view of where we were trying to go and the value it was going to bring to the things that mattered to them. I did not talk about the fact that we were wanting people to bring their whole selves to work. Those things are true, but that's not the message that was going to resonate with the people I needed to support me. So I told this story through the lens that would make sense to them and that would get them to say yes, because that's what you're ultimately trying to do. And then you have to have champions. You have to have people who believe, who are outside of your team. So your team can do a lot to get things started, but once you get to the point where you're going, you've got to build a group of people who can infiltrate very quietly the rest of the business. Because if you're only going to rely on your team, you become, oh yeah, they're the emotion team, right? Like, yes, absolutely we are, but it's more than us. There are a lot of people who believe in this, who want to see this change happen and to get these skills. So when you do those things, you tell the story in a way that makes sense to the people who you need to support from, and then you build champions, you can actually get something like this off the ground really quickly. We went from, I heard about this book and read it, to we were launching it in about 4 months. So it can happen very, very quickly.
Yeah, and one you made me think of something, Kim, that is beautiful, right? Is, different companies have different cultures and different organizations have different cultures. Don't try to go against the culture. Go with the culture and support the culture, right? It's kind of like emotional and influence, jujitsu, right? Don't try to block the punch, like go along with it and direct it. And so one of the things that, as you mentioned, Kim, too, is, we have a pretty go get them, deliver results, make it happen, hard driving culture. And so anything that feels kind of soft and squishy, people are going to be like, no, thank you. And so we framed it. And I actually use a lot of analogies and science and data. And then also, examples from high performing athletes, elite military units, people that kind of go, oh, I can resonate with that, and so those are, I think, powerful ideas. And then one little pro tip is, if you think you have somebody that's kind of supportive, but you're not really sure how to get them fully on board, do one simple trick to get a leader to support what you want to do. And that is, ask them for advice. You go, hey, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. Do you have any advice on how I could really grow this program and have it be more influential? Adam Grant talks a lot about that in his book, Give and Take, but beautiful. When you ask a leader for advice, number one, it's kind of flattering. And number two, if they give you an idea, they kind of inherently are going to support it because it was their idea. So they're going to obviously be a little more bought in. And thirdly, there's obviously value because they see more of an organizational viewpoint than maybe you do. So if you're really trying to get something going, ask for advice. That one singular word is super powerful that I use all the time, and it makes a huge difference.
Thank you. That was both super helpful. And we got another great question that came in here. And Kim, this one was for you about how do you deal with the gap in vocabulary and EQ awareness between those employees who've been trained and those employees who have not been trained yet?
Yes.
I added the yet.
Being the operative word there. Yeah, it's interesting because those people who have been trained, they are so happy to share the vocabulary. And so if somebody says, I don't understand what you mean. Oh, well, let me tell you. And they, because now what we're doing is we are actually developing champions. So in the last year, we've developed over 200 champions that now are everywhere. They're in every meeting, to Rich's point, they're in every meeting, they're in every lab. We have all of this work that's been done so that they're spreading the word, which is why then we're being asked to do more of this training. So it's interesting. You don't necessarily see, it doesn't develop as a gap like you would anticipate, because the people who've had the experience are willing to share and bring their friends and coworkers up with them to bridge that gap pretty quickly. And then once we have the chance to get everyone through the program, so now they don't just have the vocabulary, they actually have the skills and the time to build them. I think that'll really accelerate our path forward. But it's been interesting that hasn't created as much of a dichotomy as I really did anticipate there would be.
Got it. Thank you. Super helpful. And Rich, there was another question here for you about how do you see the EI work at Amazon impacting the company's social impact and responsibility in putting theory into practice?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is, I'm conjecturing a little bit. I'm not speaking on behalf of Amazon as a whole. I mean, it's a huge company. I am speaking on behalf of myself as somebody who's trying to bring a transformation. But I will say that there are a couple of things that have happened over the last few months that have been pretty powerful in helping us evolve. And it's essentially the release of 2 new leadership principles. And if you know anything about Amazon, you know that we basically live and die by them. We literally hire for them, promote based on them, commend you based on it, and fire you based on not having them. Like it's huge. We have these, we've had 14, we added 2 new ones. And the 2 newest ones are strive to be Earth's best employer. And of course, we're striving. We're not claiming we're there or we'll ever get there, but we're striving. And it talks about leading with empathy, having fun at work, making it easy for others to have fun, and really valuing the success and growth of each other. Right. So that's something, it was almost like emotional intelligence was like thought about as it was being written. So I love that. And so I think that's going to make a huge impact on our employees and just the world at large. And the other one was called Success and Scale Bring Broad Responsibility. And it's about the idea that we need to understand not only the first order effects of everything we do, but also the second order effects, things like social impact, things like, our environment and the earth, right? Some really, really huge things. And so really our belief is that, everything we're doing with the EPIC program is going to undergird and support those leadership principles along with the 14 other ones. And so it's going to be a work in progress. We're kind of like a giant aircraft carrier, so it's not going to turn on a dime. But from the responses I've seen at all levels of leadership, I really believe we're going to be able to move in that direction. And one other thing I will say is this: I've had lots of conversations with the people in the inclusion, diversity, and equity space. And one of the things we've talked about a lot is how powerfully emotional intelligence undergirds everything that they're trying to accomplish. Right. And one thing that I use as a framework is, inclusion, diversity, and equity are like the outputs. Those are the results we actually want to create. But one of the most powerful inputs is empathy. Right. How can you be inclusive and equitable without empathy first? Because everyone's different. And so if we upskill and develop more empathy and knowing how to respond with empathy, will actually also super buoy that idea of creating a more inclusive and just workforce and workplace.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rich. We are winding up our hour here. And so I'm actually going to go off the questions I have here. And I'm just curious, is there anything that we didn't get the chance to touch upon today that you wanted to share, Kim, in the spirit of learning and sharing with others, with the folks who've joined us today?
Yeah, I would say the one thing is don't delay, start. Have a bias towards action. So when it comes to this, even if you have a misstep, even if you get turned down the first time, don't give up. Keep moving. This is the right thing to do to bring this kind of thinking and data points to any business, whatever it is. And know that you aren't actually alone, even if in those moments where you feel like, oh my gosh, no one else cares about this but me. Because I will tell you, that was exactly where I was. It's like, there is nobody who cares about this as much as I do. And then I started talking about it and I realized, wait a second, there's a bunch of people in this very sciencey, very medical engineering, very technical world that I I'm an educator. So look, I do, if you look at all of the ducks in a row, you'll see me in there and you'll be like, that duck does not belong. But when I started talking about this, people started to go, oh yeah, me too, me too, me too. Okay, let's build something, let's do something. And all it took was me being gutsy enough to say it out loud. So go have those conversations, do it, find your group of people, and then start changing the world. And like, I'm going to echo you, Rich, because I love this language. Dream big and start small. Don't try to be a big thing to start with, because you won't be able to pull it off. Start small, but have that big dream that is the motivator.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kim. Rich, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm going to quote a sort of semi-famous sort of thing we say, that is, be stubborn on the vision, but flexible on the details, right? That vision of what you want to create is always ahead of you. That's your North Star. It guides you, but you're going to have to be really flexible, because a lot of things won't work, right? Take risks and think of everything as a giant experiment. That's basically what I've done. I'm like, you can try this. If it doesn't work, we'll just go back out. It's like a two-way door. Very few things are one-way doors where you walk through and it locks behind you. So as you're trying to build something out, try things, be willing to take risks, be willing to experiment, and be willing to be flexible while you continue to have that vision ahead of you. And it's worked for me, and 100,000 people later, I'm still being flexible on the details. We'll see what happens. I have no idea what's going to happen, but it's going to be a wild ride.
Oh, thank you so much, Rich. Thank you, Kim, both for your generosity of time and insight. This was such a joy and a pleasure today. I just want to remind our friends in the audience, we've got a 15-minute break after this session. We invite you to go into the lounge. As you know, recordings will be available of past sessions. And then I'm very excited to share that Kenneth Cole and Mark Brackett will be having a conversation later today. So can't wait to see you in that last session. Rich, Kim, thank you once again, and look forward to seeing you all online later.
Take care. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Thank you. Thank you.